Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's Academy webinar. We'll just wait another minute or so for any latecomers that want to join. But in the meantime, if you could confirm that you can actually see me and hear me, that would be fantastic. So to do that, you should have a chat tab at the bottom of the screen. Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so let's get going. So welcome, everybody. So the topic we're going to cover in this webinar, as you're aware, is an introduction to pricing scripts. This is going to be a maximum of 1 hour in duration. It could be a little bit shorter, but we'll try our best not to go over. If you've been to these webinars before, you'll know that I tend to just talk pretty much all the way through it. We want to make sure that you can ask any questions that pop up. So you will notice there's a chat box down on the bottom corner of your Livestorm window. So you can ask any questions in there if you have them. We have a couple of the Infigo team that are manning that chat, so they'll reply to you actually within the chat if they can do so. So in the chat today, we have Duncan, who is part of our support team, and we have Ben, who's part of our front-end team. So they should be able to answer a lot of the questions that might pop up that I don't cover. Any questions that we can't answer for whatever reason, we'll take them away. We'll make sure we take them away and reply to you at a later time. And once this webinar is completed, you will be able to rewatch it using the same link. Alternatively, we'll upload it to the Academy portal as well, which is what you can see on your screen right now. So you'll be able to access it at any point. And again, if you haven't got an Academy portal account at this point, or you've never heard of it before, please do get in touch with us and we can sort one out for you. Another bit of housekeeping before we get started properly. There are a couple of polls which I've made accessible to you. It should be right next to where you can get to the chat tab on the bottom of your screen. That's just asking whether or not you're currently using pricing scripts, just for our knowledge. And there's another one in there to see what topic you might want on the next webinar. So we do one of these every month. If there's a topic in there, or if there's not a topic in there you're interested in, please feel free to just leave a message in the chat or something, and I'll try and consider that topic as well if it's something that we can do. And then finally, in terms of housekeeping, I will be using a lot of pre-created examples in much of this webinar today. So I've loaded up a pre-created, very simple sample storefront for you there. This will remain active after the webinar. So if you need any reference points or anything when you start making your own basic pricing scripts, then you will be able to use this as a reference. And where possible, I will make it more detailed as time goes on. Let me just copy and paste this link into the chat so that you all have access. But you'll be able to get the chat, or you'll be able to get the URL as well from the Academy portal. Okay, so what this has, and say I'll be using this during the webinar today, is just a few sample products. Each of them are kind of focusing on different areas of pricing scripts, generally going from really, really basic to gradually building up more and more of the capability, primarily focusing on the generic pricing script, which we'll talk about in a moment, but also a couple of examples looking at custom pricing scripts, which you might want to create as well. So you just heard me talk about generic pricing script. This is suitable for the vast majority of scenarios. So what this is, and it's what we'll be focusing on primarily, is a pre-written script with, I want to say limited, but not that limited, customization options. But it covers the vast majority of scenarios that you might want to use pricing scripts for. Later on in the webinar, we'll also take a brief look at custom pricing scripts and how they're sort of approached. They provide a lot more capability, but have a lot more additional configuration and additional setup involved in them as well. So what I want to start off with is the creation of a very simple product that utilizes a pricing script, just to show you how that generic pricing script can be utilized. So all I've got on this storefront at the moment is a little bit of work I did in advance, which is just to create a brand new demo product. Not very much specified on this product at all, so no special setup so far. All I've done is created a new stock product, and then within the variants section, I've just assigned to it a few attributes as well. So many of you will be familiar with product attributes and what they can do. If you don't, for whatever reason, it's not something we're going to cover in detail here, but there's loads of Academy resources which will show you how to use those. So what we actually want to do, we know that there's loads of different ways that we can apply pricing to our Infigo products. So we can do it as tier pricing. We can do it as just regular, this is what the price is. We can modify the pricing based on the attributes that we select. Loads of different potential changes and differences that we can make. What we're going to focus on today is pricing via pricing scripts. And it's worth noting that in sort of generally speaking, in most cases, if you're utilizing a pricing script, it will override any of the other pricing methods that you might have applied. Okay, so what we're going to do, so we've created our product with a few attributes. Before we actually start uploading and applying any of these pricing scripts, we need to actually have the data for that pricing separately. So this is done using a CSV document. So these are really, really simple to use. It is just a basic spreadsheet. And the example we've got here, as you can see, it relates very similarly to the product that we have made. Let me zoom in a little bit. This is a very simple example. We'll get onto more details later on. But you can see that we've got our range of potential attributes. So in this case, we've got an item of clothing, which has different sizes, different colors, different materials. We've got a corresponding CSV document here where we've got those same columns. So they've got the same headers that are applying to those attributes. And then based on the configuration and selection of those attributes, it will return a particular price. So this fundamentally is what we're looking at here. Now, what we actually need to do is to get this information into Infigo. And we do this using a not very much used area of the software, apart from really this particular bit of functionality, which is the global additional data. So I'm just going to duplicate that, search for global additional data. As far as I'm aware, everyone should have access to this. If you can't, for whatever reason, please let us know. It might be something that support have to access and grant for you, but I think everyone has access. So global additional data. You can see I've already got some things in here associated with my sample products, but all this essentially is a file storage area. So we are uploading the CSV document that we've just seen to this particular area here. That means it's then accessible from within Infigo. So I'm just going to find that particular CSV, which I've now lost. Where are we? I'm just going to drag and drop that into that global additional data folder. Now, what we need to do is actually remember the name of this particular CSV, because it's that we need to reference to pull in this information into a particular product. So I've got a range of things I've updated here, but if I just find the one I've just uploaded, which is this initial demo, I can go to my settings icon, the configuration icon, and what I need is the name of that particular entry and the extension as well, so .csv. So I can just write that in separately, or I can just copy and paste it. And you can give it a new name if you want to as well. So that's the information input into Infigo itself. What we need to do now is tell our product to utilize that particular information. So we do this by going to the actual product page. So if I just go to my product management, locate the particular product of interest for me, and then go to its product variant settings. So just as a reminder of the product variant settings, most of you will be familiar with these. It's where you put in a lot of the technical elements of your product. So things like weight and sizing and pricing, all that good stuff. This is also where we specify that the product will be using a pricing script. And all we're doing is looking for this attach a pricing script option, which is quite close to the top underneath the info tab. Now I've got a few different pricing script options available in here because I've been playing around with this. What you will probably have if you've not used this before is just the generic pricing script, which is what everyone will have access to. Click on generic pricing script to apply it. Click on save and continue just to actually confirm to the product that it's using it. And then you'll see that we have some additional options appearing right underneath where we selected the use of the generic pricing script. Now, how this works is we've got a sample configuration of the pricing script, which is in the blue box, and that's what will be utilized by default. And all we need to do, if we don't want to change anything from that default entry there, then we don't need to input any additional information. What we need to do is where we need to make changes. So in our example here, we need to say which CSV document it's using, for example. We need to just copy the relevant line from this sample configuration and then paste it and change it within the pricing script configuration. So all I need to do is copy the relevant section here. Make sure I get the closing statement, closing bracket as well. And where it's saying file.csv, that's where we need to rename it with our other CSV document that we want to drag into this product. Okay. And in terms of this basic demonstration, unless I've messed something up during a live demo, that should be pretty much all we need to do. One thing to be careful of is if you're looking at the very last line on your custom configuration, you won't need this comma right at the very end. If you've got multiple lines, you might need multiple entries. You'd need a comma at the end of most of them, apart from the last line. So I'll just get rid of that comma. Save that. And then I'm actually just going to load up that product page just to see if what I've done here is actually being successful. Okay, so I can already see that I've made some kind of error, which is a great start. Okay, so what I've done, and this is actually quite a useful little tool as well, so I'm going to pretend I did this on purpose. When something doesn't match up, so when it's trying to search for a bit of information from the pricing script, from the CSV, and it can't find it, it will try to give you as much information as it can on what the problem is. So first and foremost, we have the price, which you'll see is incredibly high. This is the default price if it can't retrieve the information that it needs. So if it can't get it for whatever reason, it will show you a default price of 10,000 of whatever your specified currency is. What it will also show you, hopefully, is some information messages further down the screen as well to show you what it was that was causing the problem. So what it can't find, what it needs to do. So I can see, for example, in my case, it's saying that we don't have a attribute called cost, and we have missing a price column. Now, the reason that's come in is because in my little CSV that I made here, I've got a column called cost. And what it's actually looking for by default is a column called price. So this should be really easy to fix. I just change that and save it. Re-upload that data. And then we'll try that again. And we can see there that it's actually successfully now retrieving a price. So it's got, for this particular combination, a price of £12. I can change any of those options and it will go into that data which we uploaded into the global additional data, and it will retract and retrieve that information. Okay, so what have I got next on my plan? Let's take a look. Ah, yes. So another thing that we can utilize when we might have a problem such as this, which I've just on purpose shown you, is we have the ability to put in a debug mode as well. And there is a test mode within the configuration area of your pricing script. So if I go back to my product details screen, you'll see there that we have this little test button here. And what that will do is it will test pulling some information from your CSV file based on your default configuration. So you might have a default of a certain size, a certain color, material, whatever attributes you've got. It will use those and it will see if it can achieve a price and give you some additional information. So if I click on test, it should give me a little bit of information at the top of the screen there, telling me what it's been able to achieve. Now, this isn't a massive amount of information, but we do provide the ability to enable a debug mode as well, which is very useful if you want to see exactly where a pricing script is getting stuck, how it's getting a certain price. And this is just accomplished by adding an additional line to our configuration here. So again, we're just going to take it from our script configuration section. We can see there we've got a line which is talking about debug mode. I'm just going to copy and paste that line into here. Say that debug mode is true because we do want to utilize debug mode, and then shift around where I'm using those commas. So remember, no comma on the last line. We'll save that. And now if I click test again, we should get much greater level of information as to how it's searching through that particular data and how it's pulling in the information that it wants. Okay. So I'm just checking my little agenda to make sure I've not missed anything. Right, so that is the first basic example. And fundamentally for the generic pricing script, that is all that's involved. It's just configuring this particular section here using a combination of data in here to achieve the information that you want to achieve. Now, what we're going to go through is some of the examples I've made on that storefront that I've created for you to use. So as I mentioned before, this just sort of gradually goes through more and more complex scenarios. What you'll also find is that a couple of them, like this next one I'm going to go to here, there might be a little notice on there saying that an issue has been found with this function. Unfortunately, as I was setting up for this webinar, I discovered a couple of problems with some of the lesser used features. We've identified those now. They'll be in the process of being fixed and they will be fixed in the next deployment. However, it means that at the moment, I won't be able to show you exactly what they do, but I can talk you through the process of what they will be able to do once the fixes have been implemented. So let's start with the product I've made on additional data columns. Now, if we look at our CSV document that we made, this is about as basic as it could possibly be. It's got the names of our attributes that we want to utilize, and it's got the price that it wants to draw back. Now, there are additional bits of information that we can add in here as well if we want to apply them to the product or get some additional information on a particular product. And the main thing we're looking at here, if we go to this product, is things such as if there's an additional setup cost, if there's a particular SKU associated with a configuration of attributes, if there's a quantity that you want to consider, and we'll cover quantity more in a little bit because we're going to cover tier pricing as well. What it basically means is you can add additional data columns to that CSV, which can be utilized as part of the script. And again, if we're looking at this configuration here, we can pick out what they are. So we've got things such as setup cost column name. So if you do have a setup cost that you want to consider, you can include a column called setup. If you want it to be a name other than setup, then you can just copy and paste it into your configuration up here and just replace setup with whatever your column name is. Same process with SKU. Same process with quantity, which again we'll get onto in a little while. And if you want to rename the price column, so it's something other than price, then you can put this line in there as well. And again, all you're doing is taking this information and putting it into your pricing script configuration. So if I look at this sample product, I've put a copy there of the configuration that's utilized for this particular product. We can see that we've included an entry for quantity, for cost, for SKU, and for setup cost. Okay, moving on. So next up is tier pricing. So with the, again, referencing the basic script that we've made here, or the basic CSV that we've made here, there's nothing to do with quantity of purchased product in that particular CSV. So what that means is that regardless of how many units the person puts in their basket or wants to put in their basket, it's always going to be the same price per unit. Great for some scenarios, not so good for other scenarios. So we might want to introduce the tier pricing where we can put in how the pricing of per unit changes as the quantity changes. So let's take a look at that in a bit more detail. Okay, so this again is just an example. I'll also load up the back-end version of this product. Sorry, I just got a bit of a blip on my screen. Can I confirm that everyone can still see and hear me? Yeah? Sorry, I just had a bit of a blackout on my screen for a second. Okay, let me just go to the relevant product. Okay, so here is our tier pricing. I'll also load up the CSV document associated with this. Okay, so what we've actually got here, our CSV is written a little bit different if we want to utilize tier pricing. What we'll need is multiple versions of the same attribute configuration. Zoom in a bit more, see one of those comments. But also we'll have a quantity column as well. And what this means, so what we've got here is a section covering quantity 1, a section covering quantity 10, and a section covering quantity 50. Now, if we didn't utilize tier pricing, that means that only a specific quantity of 1, 10, or 50 would be able to return a price, which is not ideal. However, if we do enable tier pricing, what it means is that from any quantity from 1 to 9, we'll get this unit price returned. From 10 to 49, we'll get this unit price returned. And from 49 and above, or 50 and above, we'll get this unit price returned. So a really simple configuration of the CSV, and the actual configuration of the pricing script itself is quite easy as well. All we need to include is the line that says use tier pricing true. And again, you can just copy and paste that from the configuration further down. And we also need to specify which column the quantity is located in. So we need to include a line in there as well, which is quantity column name, and then just give it the name of the quantity column as it appears in the CSV. And that's basically it. And what that will end up giving us, if I just go to that product on our front end, this one is working. So we'll see that I've got, so I've got attribute A and attribute B, which I can select between. I've got a quantity of 1 to begin with, which is pulling in a certain price. But you'll notice that if I change my quantity so that it goes into one of those higher tiers, my unit price is reduced because it's pulling in from a different row in the CSV. Okay. What's next? So our next product along is multi-part CSV. So kind of my own terminology there, which might get confused with multi-part product, I suppose. But what this basically is used for is if you've got a lot of data that you want to include as part of the pricing script. So as you can imagine, if you've got sort of thousands of potential pricing configurations, if every time someone is on the product landing page and changing some attributes, it's got to go all the way through that document until it finds the relevant example, until it finds the relevant row. Great if you've only got, 20 configurations, maybe even up to 1,000 different configurations. But if you're looking at thousands and thousands of options, that could start to reduce the usability as it has to search through that data. So what we can include is multiple CSVs linked to one particular product. And what it means is that it doesn't have to search through that one entire document. It's filtered down into a few separate CSVs so it can find exactly what it's looking for much, much faster. So let's take a look at this one. Again, you guys can access this if you want to. And I'll just go to the admin area end of it as well. Okay, so this one is slightly more involved, but it's still really quite straightforward to set up. So just to give you an understanding of the format of the data that we're looking for here. So if I go into my file structure, it won't let me zoom that one in, unfortunately, so I'm sorry about that. But what it basically means here is I've got multiple CSVs, and within each of those CSVs, I've got a certain proportion of that relevant information. And I've split it by attribute B. So you do need to split it by one of your attributes. So what this means is that I've got the potential for attribute A to be from 1 to 6, and I've got the potential for attribute B to be from 1 to 6. I could have it all in one massive CSV, or I could split it out into multiple CSVs. And the way you would do that is one CSV for one version of one of the attributes. So you can see here I've got all of my entries for B1. My next one is going to have all of the entries for B2, B3, B4, B5, and then so on and so on. And then what we need to do in terms of uploading this information into Infigo is just to make sure that we have it defined in its own subfolder within the global additional data section. So if I go back to our global additional data, and I hope that's enlarged enough on the screen there, you'll see that I have all these little separate files here, but then I have these two big files as well, which are separate subdirectory folders. Creating one of these is super easy. You just go to create new directory at the top of the screen. Click create. That's just making you a new folder essentially. Access that subfolder, and then you just want to drag and drop all of those CSV parts into this particular folder. So in my case, it would be select all of those 6 and then drag and drop them all in here. Now you want to make sure that there's a similar naming convention for all of those partial CSVs that you've brought in, because it needs to reference that similar name. So you'll see that mine have all got subdirectory dash as a prefix. Whatever your prefix is just needs to be the same for all of the CSV files, and it needs to have an identical separator as well. So I've used the dash as a separator. It could be an underscore, it could be whatever you wanted, just to use as a separator. The only bit of the name that's different on each of the files is what's identifying the value of that attribute. So remember, I've got a file for each of my B attribute values. So B1, B2, B3. You'll see that I've got a CSV which is corresponding to each of those values. So that information is now drawn in. If I just go back to our configuration, now what you'll see I've brought in here, it's actually the section which is at the bottom of the config here. So base file name, subdirectory, separator, and split mapping. I've not input a file path here because we've got multiple files we want to utilize. So you can just leave that in there, but leave it as blank. I've input quantity in this example, but I don't really need to if it's not relevant. The primary ones we need to consider are these 4. So our base file name is the prefix. So the prefix of all of our CSV documents. So in my case, subdirectory. Confusingly, my subdirectory is also called subdirectory, but that is the name of the actual folder itself. So in this example, I think I named that as test directory. So this knows where it's looking within global additional data. We have our separator, which is in my case is the dash. And then we have our split mapping. So this is where you identify the attribute or attributes which are corresponding to that split. So in my case, it's my attribute B, which is causing the different CSV documents. So therefore, my split mapping is B. And what that actually means in terms of our product is on the front end, you won't see any difference. So if I go down to the actual bit where we can see the pricing calculation, it's still utilizing the same methodology. So it's still just pulling data through. But if we had thousands of data points, it'd be much, much faster to do it this way. Okay, just trying to keep an eye on the time. So I'd say for the vast majority of scenarios, that multi-part CSV and the tier pricing is what most people will need to use. Unfortunately, those are both working at the moment. The next two are some of the lesser used features which currently aren't, but will be fixed within the next week or so. So one of them is additional fields. So what this allows you to do is actually to drive some other information into the product that are not specifically to do with attributes. So if I just go to my configuration for that one again, sorry I'm clicking around so much, there's a lot of different pages I need to get to. Okay. Right, so what we're doing here, there's only a few things that can be driven in this way, or will be able to once the fixes have been made. We're talking about product weight. We're talking about dimensional information, so length, width, and height, presumably. And what it means we can do is we can drive that information based on our selection as well. So all this needs, if you look in your script configuration section here, we have a section which is called, where are we? Item property adjustments. And you can see the sample there is giving you weight. And all you're doing there is copying and pasting this. You're saying what the CSV key is. So that's the name of your associated column to do with this metric. And then you've got item field. So that is the item within the Infigo product itself that you want to actually drive. So just copy and paste those into there. And as a reminder, you can do weight and dimensional information. And just to show you where this actually applies, it's actually further down the same screen. So if you're on the product variant screen of your product, scroll a bit further down, you'll see you've got weight, length, width, and height. And those are the ones that can be driven in this way based on your configuration of attributes. Okay, and then finally, which I think I've already mentioned somewhat as well, is the renamed attributes. So we've already touched on how we can rename columns if the name in the CSV isn't the default that's in the pricing script, for example. We can also do the same with attributes themselves. So let's say, for example, here we are. That's the wrong one. Sorry, there's a lot of files to switch between. There we go. So in most scenarios, you won't need to utilize this. It's just in case you can't get around it for whatever reason. So within my CSV, I have the attribute names or the column names as C and D. However, in my actual product itself, the attributes are called A and B. Now, the easiest way to get around this, as I'm sure I don't need to tell you, is to just change the names in the CSV to be A and B, or whatever the attribute names are. If you can't, for whatever reason, then you can specify within the mapping, within the configuration of the pricing script, that you want to map a different column name to a different attribute. So this is very easy to do as well. We're again just copying and pasting from our default configuration. In this case, it is attribute mappings, I assume. So this section here, and all we're saying is the CSV key, which is the column in the CSV, and then the attribute name that we want to link to it. So you can see my example here. I've renamed or linked up or mapped attribute C, or column C to attribute A, column D to attribute B. So it's straightforward. Right. So I've got one on there, which is the error example as well. So we unintentionally did that right at the start, just to show you that you get the default value of 10,000 appearing if there's no relevant price drawn in, and it will give you some messages if there's a problem as well. What you might also find on the error is that the debug mode will really help you with how or what's causing a problem as well. So if I go on to the error product, now this is a really simple example. The problem here is that the CSV file that we've tried to reference does not exist. So as errors go, it's a fairly easy one to rectify. But just to show you how this would appear in the test mode and the kind of messages it will give you. So if I click on test, just as a reminder, our debug mode is active here. So we're getting some additional information to show us the problem. And you can see that it gives us every single step to try and tell us how that particular problem was hit. And we can see there that it's quite clearly saying that no CSV of the relevant name was found. We therefore know how we can fix it. Right. So, as the name of the webinar is here, this is an introduction to pricing scripts. So that is about all we're going to cover on the generic pricing script here, but that should cover the vast majority of its capabilities. The examples are very simple that I've gone through, but it should give you the foundation of creating something much more complex. And as I mentioned, those repairs to the script should be within the next deployment or the next 2 deployments. So they'll be not very long at all. I do want to spend a little bit of time just introducing you to custom scripts, custom pricing scripts as well. Now, there's a lot more coding involved in this, and I'm not pretending to be an expert coder in any way, shape, or form, but I do have a couple of simple examples that I can show you, just to sort of give you a flavor for how you might approach things and how you might, or what type of things you might be able to do with custom pricing scripts. So just to verify really what the custom pricing scripts are, they're much more niche and bespoke scenarios that they apply to. The generic pricing script, as I mentioned, can be applied to the vast majority of scenarios, but there's some cases where it just won't do. You can develop the custom pricing scripts yourselves if you have the skills to do so in-house. Alternatively, our professional services team, of which Ben, who's on the chat, is a member, can be commissioned to help you create them as you need to. Please do note as well that troubleshooting self-written or amended pricing scripts are not covered in your general support contract. So that's not, you can't ask our support team as such how to fix your own custom pricing script. But then again, that is something that our front-end team might be able to be commissioned to give you a hand with. Right. So these are written in a slightly different way. And there's another area of Infigo that you would access to actually get to these custom and write these custom pricing scripts. Now, again, I think everyone has access to this. If you've not, then please let us know, and we might need to raise a ticket or something to get it activated, but I believe everyone should be able to get to it. So if I just type in pricing scripts, that will take you to this particular page where you've got the ability, quite simply, just to enter and develop your own custom pricing scripts. So you can see I've got a couple of examples in here already. If I wanted to create a new one, I just go to add new record, enter a name and a description. And then if I go to edit script, it takes me to this separate page here where I can actually start to create my pricing script. And this does include IntelliSense as well. So when you're actually creating these, you might need to draw information from within Infigo. So let's say the actual price that you've specified in the product, and you'll need to know how to access this within the system. So what you'll notice is if I start writing something, so if I say item dot, for example, you can see that it's got this, what's generally known as IntelliSense, where you can see the next things that you can add into here. So it will give you an indication of what you can get to from the Infigo system and hopefully how you might be able to get to it, rather than having to just figure it out by yourself. So for example, if I wanted the price for whatever reason, or you to utilize the price that we've specified in a product, and by that I mean, I've got too many tabs open, 1 sec. By that, I mean the price that we've kind of hard coded into this option here. We can say item dot, we can see that price is an option in there. So I could utilize that. And if there's anything we can get to from within price, which I don't think there is, you can put another dot and it will give us corresponding. And this allows us to actually develop this code. Now, I'm not going to go over these in a massive amount of detail, but just to show you a couple of examples that we have available. And again, you have these for reference on your sample storefront that you can access. The first one is a custom pricing script, which is looking at a price based on the department of the user. So I'll load that up, and I'll also load it up in here. Now you can see here why you need more in-house coding skills to be able to do something like this, and why the generic pricing script might not be able to accomplish it. So the generic pricing script is looking more at things within one particular product. In a scenario like this, we might want to show a different price based on the user that's actually viewing that particular product. And this is the kind of thing you would do. So you would draw in information such as the price you specified for the product, draw in information such as the department that the current user is assigned to. You use some other code to specify which price it shows and what it utilizes, and then you return that price. So I'm not going to go through every single line of code here because we could be here for a while and I don't know how useful it would be, but you can sort of take a look at this. As I say, I'll leave this available for you. You can take a look at how it's created and try and get an understanding of it. The other example that we have, actually, let me show you that on the front end first of all. So this custom script is again utilizing a CSV document. So uploaded to the same place, it's still uploaded to global additional data. And the contents of that CSV are just displayed here just for reference, basically saying that we've got a SKU, we've got a name, and then we've got a higher fee and a lower fee, which are based on the department that the person's in. What it's basically doing in the background, so the user will never see this selection, whoever's logged in and whoever's viewing the product will see the price associated with that particular selection. So we've got a product that we're on, and then based on which department I'm in. So this particular user is in the lower fee department. I'm getting this price returned. And again, this is one example of the countless applications you can have and countless different formats of custom script. Okay, the other example we've got is calculating price per square meter. And again, this is really, really simple. All it's doing in this particular case is giving the user two input boxes. They can put in exactly the size of whatever product this is, and then it will give us back a price associated with that entry. Again, it's just a very simple example. But if I say, for example, I want 2 meters by 1.25, it will show me the exact price associated with that particular selection. Now, the reason I've shown this one is that this one doesn't use a CSV at all. You don't have to use the CSV. This is just performing a calculation in the background. So it's taking a base price that we've specified for 1 square meter, and then based on what we've entered in the width and the height, it's calculating the square meterage and giving us an updated price. So in terms of the actual code that that's utilizing, it's assigning a couple of variables to a couple of our product attributes. So the width and height attribute, which we've assigned to the product in the normal way. It's then defining a few more variables, performing some basic calculations, and returning a final price. Now, again, I'm not going to go through every single line of code, but it's there for reference if you want to sort of understand how it's doing it. And I've tried to put some notes on there as well, so you can get your head around it if this is not your kind of speciality. Okay, and then in terms of actually utilizing those custom scripts that you've made, it's in exactly the same methodology, exactly the same way in which you specify the generic pricing script. So if I go to, again, one of my many, many tabs, go to my product variant details, and then instead of selecting just the generic pricing script, any other custom scripts that you've made will also be in this list, and you can just select the one that you want to use on that particular product. And that is essentially it. Okay, so I think that covers pretty much everything that I wanted to show you. It is just an introduction to pricing scripts. Hopefully it gives you the knowledge to begin the process if you want to start going down that particular route. Let me just take a quick look at the chat. So it looks like Ben and Duncan have been addressing most of your queries. Just as a reminder, this will be available again if you want to review it at any point. This website I've built, I've copied the link for you, and that will remain active as well if you want to utilize it. And I've also put up those polls. So if you do want to suggest, if you want to choose something for the next topic, please do let us know in the polls. Alternatively, if there's something that is never appearing in these polls that you really want as a webinar topic, just let us know in the chat and I'll try my best to include it if it's possible to do so, and if the desire is there for that particular topic. Okay, so I think that's about it from me. I'll leave the webinar open for a few more minutes in case there's more chat questions that come in, but I am going to stop talking now. So thank you very much for attending. I hope it has been useful for you, and I hope to see you at the next webinar. And thank you, Ben, and thank you, Duncan, for fielding the questions that have come in the chat. Very much appreciate it. So thank you, guys. As I say, I'll leave the webinar open for a few minutes, and we'll see you next time. Hello again. For those of you that are still here, one of the questions I've noticed there, or one of the answers rather, from Ben, is the more information button. And I should have mentioned that. So within the pricing script screen, when you go and create or edit one of your pricing scripts, you've got this more information button here. And that will give you a load of information as to the possible things that can go into that IntelliSense, basically. So the kind of things and the structure of things that you can start to write. So yeah, that's actually a great place to start if you want to take a read through that, just to see what kind of things you can pull in.